Hello, fellow Supermom. Welcome to the latest episode of the Special Needs Supermom podcast. In this episode, I'll talk about why you should get an ADHD diagnose and why you shouldn't. You wouldn't think it's such a controversial subject anymore, but still, a lot of people struggle with getting a diagnose for several reasons. So, in this episode, I will try to explain why it can be super useful, but also when you shouldn't get a diagnose for either your kid or maybe yourself. As you might know, I got my ADHD diagnosis in December, age 45. Why? Several reasons. I was kind of curious because in April last year, for this podcast, I interviewed a young woman with ADHD, and she was diagnosed at the age of 24. And when listening to her, I went like, I'm hearing myself. OMG. And it got me thinking. I've always been known for my business. I'm present when I'm around, and I talk a lot, and I'm forgetful, and I always have a busy head. And of course, Wonder Boy has ADHD. And we always said, Wonder Boy, autism and ADHD. You've got this from your dad and you've got this from your mom. Yet, I never linked it to myself. Until I interviewed that young lady and I went like, this sounds like me. With that came also, we've got Alzheimer's in the family. And I'm extremely forgetful about the most stupid things. So I went like, I won't have, what is it called? Early onset dementia or anything like that, because it got me worried. And also, to be honest, I was a bit curious about the whole testing and the process for this podcast, for you to talk about how a diagnosis can be and what is involved with it and everything else. So those three things combined, I was like, I'm just going to get tested. Why not? So the number one reason can be just because you're curious and you might think it's useful to know. Number two, because you're worried. Because of your kids, because of yourself, because of certain behavior. And with that comes number three, and that is that, if your kids or yourself run into problems at home, at school, at work, in relationships, or maybe number four, because you struggle yourself. Maybe the outside world didn't notice anything or doesn't see a problem, but you are struggling with certain things. That was kind of also the case here, because when I told my husband about, I think I'm going to get myself tested, he went like, why? Why would you do that? There's nothing wrong with you. That's his favorite line. Mr. Darcy, Mark Darcy in Bridget Jones' Diary, when he says, I like you just the way you are. And my husband says that every time I do something weird or funny or... He likes me, he loves me just the way I am. And that's, of course, wonderful. He's used to me not finishing a sentence 8 times in a row. He's used to me bouncing from subject to subject. But he also sees that, I'm an extremely busy mom, we have special needs kids, I have my own business, and that's all going well. So why would I want to know? I mean, I don't have a problem, right? Well, yes, from the outside everything was going well, but I did get into a supermom burnout. That's kind of maybe an extra... It is a different topic because there were several reasons, of course, for that. But the fact that my mind never stops thinking. And, sometimes it can take me forever to do a really simple thing. Or, My husband is in the military, and every other year, he has a new position. And for the life of me, most of those titles, I can remember his rank, of course, but all those titles, for the life of me, I can't remember. How stupid is that? I mean, my bloody husband. Why can't I remember, that he now has this and this title and now he's doing blah, blah, blah. But also, I'm terrible at names. If we're at, we in the Netherlands, covered aside, we normally have once a year, for officers in the army, a king's ball. So, gala, really nice. And every year, I introduce myself to people, and they're like, oh yeah, but we met last year and we had such a great conversation. And I'm like, no idea. It's beyond awkward. So nowadays I just wait till the other person takes the first step, or I ask my husband, do I know those people? Have we seen them before? But it's also, to do with simple things like my administration. For my business, I've got, an accountant. But even my own administration, doing things that, for my kids, paperwork. Oh, it's so weird that it takes so much energy. So I got my diagnose, and I didn't have a problem with it. I wasn't even that surprised. But then I started reading about it, ADHD in women and adults. And I went like, suddenly so many things made sense. And it was, one part I felt kind of guilty, but the other part was, I went like, oh, this is not really weird at all. This is part of, having ADHD. So it can be extremely helpful because it can give you insights. It can, when you read about it, you're like, oh, that's why my kid does such and so. And that's why I do this and this and that. So it can really be helpful because it gives you an insight in how your brain works and how your kid brains work, and why sometimes things don't go quite well, and why your kid sometimes has this hyper focus, and you could shoot a cannon beside him and he wouldn't hear you. That would be the case when I'm, when I, as a kid, I was reading a book, for instance. So it can, first of all, give an insight in your kid's behavior and why things work or why they don't. Second, it opens up this world of, this can of tools you can use. You can get extra help at school, for instance. You can start cognitive behavioral therapy. You don't only have to have ADHD. I mean, you can use it for other things as well. But often, because you have a diagnose, you can get a discount, or your insurance company covers it, etc., etc. And therapy is not a quick fix or an easy solution, but it can be extra insightful and can really help you improve and work on the things that don't go well. It gives you this really handy toolbox. And then, of course, you have medication. That's not for everybody. And I was kind of shocked when I heard that for ADHD, the number one treatment is still medication. And I went like, seriously? In this day and age? But when I got tested, a part of it was doing a test with medication and without. And OMG. There is no music, there's not enough wine in the world, or holidays, that really, really quiets your mind. And until I used my meds, it started with, when I got tested, my mind was so nice and quiet. Okay, my first thought was, well, this is, where are all the voices? Not that I'm crazy, but where are all the thoughts? And then I went like, well, this is boring. It's so quiet, but it is really nice. And it can really help you focus way, way better on your tasks. You don't lose your creativity or anything like that. But when you're working on something, you don't have all these ideas bouncing in your head, causing you to take 3 times as long on a normal task. So, when should you get a diagnose? Of course, if you're curious and think it's helpful. If you are worried about certain behaviors of your kid or maybe yourself. Number 3, if you struggle or your kid struggles, whether that's in school, at work, at home, in relationships. Or maybe number 4, when you struggle silently inside, with yourself. And it's, it can bring, the insights are really useful. Therapy, not a quick fix, really helps. And for me, medication helps as well. And I saw that with Wonderboy as well. Wonderboy has been on and off meds since he was 7 or 8. So that's about a good 10 years now. And we tried several. And there's not one, it works differently for everybody. And sometimes it needs time to adjust and you have short working and long working. But it also really helped him focus. So, yes, if one of those things I just mentioned and you're struggling with this, or you're just curious and think it's useful, go for it. When shouldn't you, however, get a diagnose? First of all, if other people think you or your kid should. If you don't see a problem, if your kid is not struggling, don't. In the end, it comes down to your kid, you, when you decide to get a diagnose or not. Not because your mother-in-law thinks your son is annoying, or the teacher can't, keep everything in control in the class. That's not a good reason, because you, of course, have to be open for it. And if you only see it as a negative thing instead of, a useful tool, it will only make, if you struggle, it will only make it worse. So only do it when you want it yourself, when you struggle with things, when you're open to getting that stamp, when you don't see it as a bad sign for everything. So, know when other people think you should. Also know when you think just getting the diagnose will give you an excuse for all kinds of things. It explains a lot of things. And some things I do think people should just accept in the way you behave, or the way you do things. In the way you do things, I think, is a better way to say it. But if you think, now I've got this label, and now I can use it as an excuse to be rude, not do your job, fail at school. I was thinking about, should I say that? But yeah, fail at certain things. No, I don't think you should use it as a sole excuse for behavior and not doing your job. Or, if you got a task and you said you would do it, and in the end you don't, and you say, well, it was too hard because I've got ADHD. Say no then. Or if you can't do that in your day-to-day job, seriously, I think you should change whatever you're doing. So I don't think it's an excuse that can help you. It's a free out of jail card for things. Also, I don't think you should get the diagnose because you think with the diagnose you will get medication, and with the medication all the problems will be gone. Because they won't. Even with medication, I still procrastinate like crazy with certain things like administration. Things I really don't like. Often things I really don't like. I can still procrastinate like the queen. The medication is not a quick fix for things. If you want to go through with, a diagnose, see it, one as, insightful, and can help you and can guide you. But often, besides medication, it's also about behavioral therapy, that you can use to change things. But changing behavior is not easy. It's like a diet, You pick it up and then you're like, bleh. You pick it up and you're like, oh, let's just, ignore things and do it the old way. While the old way was perhaps bad. So, yeah, you're in it for the long haul. And like I said, I don't mind my diagnose at all. No problems with it. And I find the medication and the therapy extremely useful. Example, I never realized, like I said, I'm extremely forgetful. I write things down. I have to-do lists. But I have several to-do lists. I have a to-do list for the Juvenile Arthritis Association I'm a board member for. I have a to-do list for my work, of course. I have got a to-do list for my kids, things like that. But they were all over the place. And one thing I learned, as simple as it sounds, never thought about it. You have one agenda. Not a digital one, and one for your non-profit work, and not one extra for medical stuff. No, one agenda. And with that agenda, one to-do list. So you have an overview, really. Super useful, never thought about it. But really helps me a lot. Does it mean that I still sometimes ignore stuff? Yes, but I'm getting better at it. So I hope this helps you determine whether you should go for it and when you shouldn't. Whether it's for yourself or for your kids. I hope you have a lovely, maybe even sunny spring day. Till next time. Bye.